and welcome to the InterPlex. In late 2022, I had the first of a series of illuminating interactions with Brazilian environmental physicist Paulo Artaxo. Artaxo leads an interdisciplinary team of researchers at the University of São Paulo that focuses on the Amazon and climate change, and has also worked at Harvard University, NASA, and Stockholm University, amongst others. In this interdialogue, we spoke about the importance of interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary collaborations, and the severe challenges faced by his research team and students due to funding cuts and anti-scientific misinformation that exploded under the regime of President Jair Bolsonaro. We also touched upon his research into Amazonian aerosols and their impact on regional and global climate patterns, which since this first interdialogue is a topic that Artaxo has helped to further inform me about in order to aid my own research into Andes-Amazon interconnectivity. There was some focus in this conversation on the Amazon's impact on climate in the Andes, where Artaxo has conducted fascinating research from data collected at more than 5,000 meters high atmospheric monitoring station in Chacotaya, Bolivia, such as how black carbon aerosols that come from Amazonian deforestation caused by anthropogenic fires can increase glacial melt in the Andes, and how precipitation in the Andes and south-central South America is highly reliant on the complex processes of evapotranspiration and condensation that come from Amazonian vegetation. We began by speaking about cross-disciplinary research in Brazil.
Why is investing in environmental science and environmental physics, these kinds of cross-disciplinary fields, why is that so important for Brazil and for the world, really? But why is that so important, and what's going on right now with all the cuts to funding in these fields?
In general, let's say, I do not call it environmental science, but actually sustainability science. It's much more than environmental issues, It's absolutely essential today to any country that aims to have a any future. So it's as strong as this, So the 17 ODS, the Paris Agreement goals, and all the initiatives in terms of building up a sustainable society is, of course, absolutely essential. Science is the main tool to achieve that, So it's a pity that, in the last 4 years, Brazil have a very, very bad view from the government, in terms of scientific progresses and so on and so on. But I think that after October 30, this will just go around, and on January 1st, we have to starting to build up the science in Brazil under a new framework, and rebuilding a lot of things that were destroyed over the last 5-6 years.
Yes, I've seen that. I've come to understand that. It's very sad what's been going on. Do you think things can change back, rebuild so quickly if Lula wins?
So quickly, no. Because of course the damage was very large.
Yes.
And the inertia of the infrastructure system in general is very large. You never, rebuild everything, let's say, in 1 year or 2 years, But at least you have to start the process. So young people can see some perspectives in terms of, let's say, medium and long term, and then start working together to build up a new science infrastructure, universities, courses in university that have to be reviewed, and so on and so on. I think that will be the task we'll have to fulfill over the next, not just the next 4 years, but probably for the next decade.
Next decade, yeah. Yeah, it seems like a big change has been just a sense of optimism. Like there used to be a lot more optimism before. I came to Brazil when I was doing my PhD in 2010, and everybody was much more optimistic about the future. Other students and now it seems like so many people, they want to either leave the country or change their careers. So what you're talking about are some of the first steps are just to let the younger people, the younger researchers have a view of the future that's different than it is right now, more positive?
Oh yeah, that time, oh yes, no question about that. See, from my own students, actually, let's say more than half of them left Brazil already.
Wow.
More than half of them went to United States and Germany, for instance, and they are extremely well employed there, And Brazil is losing thousands of brilliant scientists, So we have to reverse this as quickly as possible and start building the science now in Brazil, as we mentioned already.
Yes. What is the long-term impact of you losing these young researchers? What do you see as the long-term impact?
Yeah, most of them will never come back. For sure, no question about. So a fraction of a new generation of scientists were certainly lost. It's harder to know if it is 10%, 30%, or 50%. There is no statistic for that. But from my own laboratory, at least I lost 50% of the postdocs.
50%, and that's over the last 6 or 7 years?
Over the last 5 years.
5 years, 50% lost. Wow. Your laboratory is focused on environmental physics, atmospheric sciences? Yeah. So are these postdocs, are they physicists? Are they other fields, diverse?
They are physicists, meteorologists, mathematics, because we work in a very interdisciplinary science agenda.
That's great. I wanted to ask you about that. What is some of the importance of how your field in environmental physics and atmospheric sciences, how does that ability to have dialogue between the disciplines help to inform society, inform other scientists? Does it help to create types of knowledge that are more easy to communicate what the impact is because it has different disciplines involved?
Yeah, for sure. What happens is that, science communication has done a tremendous progress, over the last year, especially because scientists started to speak up more loudly and clearly to the society about, first, the importance of science, second, how science is associated with actually development, economic development, and thirdly, all the risks in terms of environmental science in Brazil we are facing with the destruction of Amazonia, with the increase in climate extremes, with global climate change impacting even more, the Brazilian society and so on. So actually, scientists started to speak up much more intensively. You can see this very clearly, over the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So this is a positive movement because certainly, the society is much more aware of what's going on and the importance of the scientific development for economic and social development. So this is the positive aspect of this crisis we're having right now.
Do you think Brazilian society overall does value science?
Oh yeah, no question about all the moves that they have done in Brazil over the last few years shows that the population in general, more than 80%, for instance, are against the destruction of Amazonia, and certainly more than 70%, see science as an important aspect of the development. So basically, I think this is much more, let's say, accepted now than is principally in the Brazilian society.
Okay. And do you see the current administration as anti-scientific, like categorically anti-scientific?
Like in all extremely right governments, they are anti-science, they are against new knowledge, like in US, like in many countries where extremely right-wing government took.
Sure. Yeah, that's certainly what seems to be going on. I just wonder, when they are so effective at promoting anti-scientific rhetoric and misinformation through social media, how do the scientists inform the public better about what is real evidence versus things that are just kind of made up by the other side of things? What is the way to make evidence more important for the public?
One of the serious and important changes we had over the last year is the dissemination of fake news, including science, So this was the strategy of the extreme right, to try to, let's say, devaluate science in general. And this strategy actually worked on many different aspects. In Brazil, not about vaccines and so on, but certainly about many other relevant scientific aspects of our society. So I think we have a long way to really get rid of fake news in a new type of information society, where fake news could be really a symptom of the past. And I think really need to do that.
And since your lab and your collaborators come from different disciplines, are you seeing any specific fields where less students are entering, like in specific environmental fields or basic research in physics, or just everything is not attracting as many students now? Are some worse than others? I guess is what I'm asking.
We have numbers.
Yeah.
To quantify this.
Yes.
We will see a general trend. Certainly, a few areas could be more impacted than others. Specifically, basic science certainly is one of the hardest hit areas. But if we don't have the numbers to really show that this is actually happening, or serious research on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I understand. I guess I also wonder, because I've spoken to a lot of both basic scientists, physicists especially, because that's my background as well, and also some social scientists. Both seem to have a lot of problems. I guess I wonder about those that are interested in environmental, ecological sciences. Are they losing motivation to enter those fields, or do they just think that they need to leave the country? What is the situation for them?
On the other side, society continues to see university, the personal, how do I say? For instance, the person who works on my house, cleaning and taking care. All she wants is that her son could enter the University of São Paulo because she sees that as basically the only opportunity to go up in the economic level. So these feelings are very, very strong in Brazil, everywhere. So they see actually, education as a really important tool into getting better life. But of course, with the economic crisis, with the because the number of students that have entered the university over the last 4 years was mostly frozen, So there is no new university, not a single one, that was created under Bolsonaro government. Under Lula government, over 8 years, he made it 25 new universities. So this says a lot on what are the government priorities.
For sure. When you talk about how they see, a lot of the society sees education as an important tool to rise up through to have better economic opportunities also. I know a lot of scholarships have been lost over these years too, and that would go, I would think, to the poorest students, the ones that need it most. So if these poorer parts of society see that there's no scholarships, do they still see it at all possible to enter universities?
Yes or no. Of course, a lot of people that cannot find opportunities in the scholarships to fund their work in the university, will certainly do other things. Other people just started the university, try to get the, let's say, non-official works like Uber drivers or other things, just to keep them being able to continue in university.
Okay.
And so on.
Yeah, so they take a side job to do that. Do you see the lost scholarships as also having a long-term impact? Because we talk about some of the brain drain, people leaving, but the scholarships as well?
No question about for the people who are getting out of university, if they don't see a possibility to be hired with the new concursos here in the university, they will try positions abroad, and they get it because in general they are really brilliant students.
Okay.
Much better than the average student in other countries. So they easily find a position. That's the case of my students, for instance.
Okay, great. So they're the ones that have the scholarships are some of the most brilliant students, and then they are able to find something abroad.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that also the case with the program from before, the Science Without Borders, that it was some of the most talented students that were sent abroad?
No, actually, the Science Without Borders, most of the students that were trained outside of Brazil have returned.
They've returned?
Yeah,
most of
them. There are some research on that.
Okay.
But when they returned, they were shocked, by the new situation. So then they finished their degrees and so on and so on. I had 1, 2, 3 students that went outside out of Brazil for Science Without the Border. They returned to Brazil, and then they are looking out for positions, or they got position abroad because there were 0 contracts in all universities in Brazil over the last years. So we have to work to get rid of this situation, to quickly motivate brilliant and young professionals, because they are not students anymore,
right.
To really believe in the future of Brazil and actually work here.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, many returned. Most of them returned, but they found few opportunities. So they had to. So they then either had to leave or do something different.
Yes, that's the point. Because in the federal research institutes, like in INPE, for instance, not one single new professional was hired in the last 4 years.
Not one.
No one.
Wow.
And the same with the federal universities.
Wow. In the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And were many did many lose their jobs also, or they just lost because they left because there was no opportunity? If nobody was hired, were others lost?
Because there was no opportunity.
Okay.
For sure.
Wow. Why do you feel science is so important to Brazil's future and also maybe for the region? Like, what do you think of Brazil as a regional influence for, let's say, Latin America or South America as far as investing in science and projects around science?
Yeah, by far, Brazil first place, Mexico second, and Argentina third, are the pillars in terms of science in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, University of São Paulo, that is the most well-ranked university in Latin America, receives a lot of students from Bolivia, Peru, Paraguay, and so on, So, Brazil is, let's say, a hub of scientific development for South America, Why is science important for development? I think this is quite obvious, that in the knowledge society that we are right now, without science, you is basically, let's say, committed to underdevelopment, there is no future in any country today without science, without actually supporting educational programs, and so on. So basically, that's the only way that Brazil can live this underdeveloped situation that we have right now.
And do you see it as crossing different demographics of society and also different cultures, including, speaking of the Amazon, including with indigenous people? Is there the possibility for more dialogue when there is a respect for science?
Yeah, of course, this certainly helps. But of course, the distance between indigenous people in Amazonia and the Brazilian science is very, very large. There is a gigantic gap between the interactions between traditional knowledge and the science we do in our universities and in our research institute. This needs to be improved very significantly.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear also. It's something I do work with also, mostly in Colombia, but in parts of the Amazon, just trying to combine knowledge systems and see what kind of programs can come from that. So it's good to hear that's. But you say the gap is very, very large in Brazil, that there's not much of an effort so far to combine the knowledge systems.
Yeah.
But do you see some potential for that as far as the work in the Amazon, especially?
Yes, of course. All the recent research initiatives in Amazonia, like the Science Panel for the Amazon, that congregates 90 different countries, in a common research agenda, the need to integrate the traditional knowledge is everywhere. But we don't have that. We don't have the tools. We don't have the methodologies on how to do that properly, how to recognize the traditional knowledge and integrate the traditional knowledge on our science. So I think this is way far away of what we could do in terms of integrating these critically important components.
Okay, great. But some of maybe there's not an integration, but there's maybe a collaboration that goes on sometimes, like the alert systems for the Amazon deforestation and inform the agencies that work with the indigenous people, something like that to help stop the deforestation.
Who does that better are actually NGOs. Like Amazon, IPA, those proposals of different NGOs, research NGOs, that's a very important in the Amazon region, to really bridging the gap between indigenous people and our white, let's say, society. So I think that the roles of NGO are extremely important on that, much more than universities and research institutes.
I work with some researchers again in Colombia that focus on this Andes to Amazon connection, whether it's hydrological or through corridors of migratory animals. But one thing that I was coming across with your research also is maybe the influence of the deforestation in the Amazon on precipitation patterns in the Andes. Is there anything you can comment on with that? Is there a relation between deforestation and glacial recession, for example, or anything like that that's been established?
Yeah, not exactly over the Andes. There are many different studies that show the influence of deforestation on precipitation in the southern part of Amazonia and on the central Brazil, where most of the agribusiness is established. So there is really quite the solid science shows that deforestation can and is and probably is influencing precipitation patterns in the central Brazil. Much less developed is the issue of the impact in the precipitation in the Andes. The first thing is that there are very few monitoring sites, for environmental variables like temperature, precipitation over the Andes, and that's a problem.
Sure.
And second, the Andes are extremely difficult to model because of the influence of the topography.
Okay, sure.
Basically, we see the position of black carbon from biomass burning over the Andes, and that certainly speed up the melting of the snow and ice over the Andes. But observational studies are being quite difficult in this point.
So this would be like what? So aerosols, sulfur particles that go on the Andes and make the albedo go up.
The position of black carbon, for instance, over the snow over the Andes, increasing the albedo and accelerating the melting of the glaciers. This was observed for Chacaltaya. This was observed for some very small areas where observation exists. But we need a much more, let's say, strong observational network to be able to do that.
And you're saying that the change in the precipitation patterns for central Brazil is that it goes up, the precipitation goes up with the deforestation in the Amazon? Is that what I understood?
No, precipitation goes down.
Down in central Brazil. Okay. And maybe just some other examples related to that about how the tropical forests are so critical for climate regulation globally and regionally. Is there anything you can comment on for that? I know it's a wide open, but just some general important trends.
It's not wide open. I think it's quite close, actually.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, Amazonia is critical for global change for several reasons. One of them is because Amazonia contains 120 billion tons of carbon in the ecosystem. This is about 10 years of all fossil fuel burning in our planet. So basically, Amazonia is critically important for the carbon cycling in general. And on the other side, Amazonia has an important vulnerability because if the developed countries does not stop fossil fuel burning, bye-bye Amazonia the same way as deforestation. Because forest degradation in many parts of Amazonia, because of the increasing temperature and decreasing precipitation, it's already making the forest less resilient and is making the forest a carbon source instead of a carbon sink.
Right.
So basically, the latest research makes it very clear that Amazonia and global climate change are intrinsically linked. That we have to fight both in terms of to be successful in preserving Amazonia.
Sure. Yeah, that's very, very understandable. Are there any more, say, kind of dynamic, complex phenomena that are related to the aerosols, for example, that then impact wind shear or something like that, that then has to do with the...
Certainly there are, let's say, the aerosols effects are very, let's say, local or regional, instead of global because of their lifetime in the atmosphere, And we have documented very clearly the change in the precipitation pattern due to increase in aerosols or cloud condensation nuclei particles. So basically we see this very clearly, as well as changes in the radiation balance over the Amazon, So basically increasing diffuse radiation, versus direct radiation, and things like that.
Great. And when you say regional, generally it's so extensive, but how far can, if there's a massive clearing, forest fire in central Amazon of Brazil, how far can that drift to the aerosols?
It certainly influences the whole South America.
All South America, okay.
Yeah. We have a satellite image from modes, for instance, sensor that shows clearly, the extent of the aerosol plume goes well over, let's say, 78% of the South America area.
Okay, that's quite important. And if there was not this problem with deforestation, how does that help to stabilize some of the patterns in the region?
Yeah.
It stabilizes?
Yeah, it helps to destabilize because it changes the radiation balance, it changes the surface albedo, it changes the hydrological cycle. So it changes everything.
Sure.
One of the important points is to enhance the scientific cooperation between the North and the South, between the United States and Brazil, for instance. That's a very important initiative, For instance, people in Brazil who were doing global climate modeling, they basically have retired, but nobody was hired in his place. So basically now Brazil has important needs in terms of support for scientific developing critical areas where we just lose people that are essential in several areas. One of them is this area climate modeling, for instance, and so on. So basically, I think that emphasizing the importance of enhancing scientific collaboration between North and South is really important.
But does that include also between Europe and Brazil?
Yes.
And what about regional collaboration, like all the countries that have...
regional collaboration, but in general, regional collaboration is much more difficult.
Why is that?
Between Brazil and Colombia, Brazil, Venezuela, Brazil, Peru, and so on, So there is no, let's say, strong bodies, who enhance Latin America scientific cooperation. We have the IEI, the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research in Montevideo, but the amount of funds became mobilized to intensify regional collaboration is very, very, very small.
And is there that's too bad to hear.
Action, that will help a lot all the Latin American countries to speed up their scientific development.
Right, because that seems to be an interest of yours also, not just in Brazil, but to foster scientific development for the region, for developing countries of the world. Do you have any ideas you want to share with me for how best to do that with Brazil as a hub and also within other countries? What are some ways to do that?
I think that, for instance, in terms of Amazonian research, it can profit very significant, from international partnership. As is a very important and critically important issue for the global climate, and also to mitigate quickly emissions, because it's important always to emphasize that the cheapest, quickest, and easiest way to reduce emissions is through zero deforestation. And deforestation right now is 17% of the global emissions of greenhouse gases. And we can, in 4 or 5 years, with a very small amount of investments, really zero deforestation and zero tropical forest greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that, if the United States and Europe wake up for this simple issue, we could do a lot in terms of mitigating greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, of course. And how would you see that working? They would support technically, financially, and work with local researchers, local institutes in the different Amazonian countries?
Institutions from Latin American countries, but also international institutions.
Sure.
Including partnership with the American universities and European research institutes.
Yeah, also.
Collaboration is key on this issue,
And you think with that kind of support from the global north, there's more potential for collaboration regionally as well to bring that together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Paulo.
Thank you for joining us for this interdialogue. You can subscribe to be notified of future episodes and by following us on our social media channels at the InterPlex. Visit our website, theinterplex.org, for more interdisciplinary and intercultural content and to join our growing collaborative community.